Hello ninjas, and welcome to our fundamental video on arrays. Now of course there is a reason I'm sitting here in the floor in the dojo, and that's because arrays work just like these cubbies here. An array, you create it and then you have your little cubby slots to store data. So we have our number 0. Arrays always start at 0, so that's something to keep in mind. So we could put our little I guess he's a praying mantis in our cubby 0, but remember our praying mantis in code could be anything. It could be a string, so it could be words, it could be numbers, it could even just be true or false. But let's go ahead and put our grasshopper in 1 here. So we've got 1, and we'll put the grasshopper in there. And I'm not real sure what this guy is, but you guys probably do. Here's 2. So we're going to put this guy in our number 2 over here. Now, one of the great things about cubbies, when you're like in elementary school, you can go find your number and get your stuff back out of it. It's just like that here. So if you wanted to get number 1, you would get Mr. Grasshopper back out. So that's our little introduction to our arrays. Let's jump to the computers so we can see how it really works. We've already talked about how our arrays are just like bookshelves, and our indexes are those pieces of paper with number 0 to some number, and we'll talk more about that number, how long that array is. And we also talked about we can put objects in those cubbies, and those objects can be about anything. They can be strings, they can be numbers, they could be just about anything you can think of. But we are going to look at how those are implemented in both JavaScript and Python. Now, just as a note of terminology, I say array, but I kind of use that interchangeably with list because they're two different things, but they're very similar. They act very similar. The biggest difference is you can add and delete items from lists, and arrays you cannot. Arrays are a little bit faster though, so it is a trade-off. But in both languages, we'll be talking more specifically about lists. So, if we hop in here, you can see right over here is how we declare our lists. So we declare it and we set it equal to, you can see these square brackets. Now those square brackets always tell you that it's a list or an array. And then once again, we can do it just like that with items separated by commas. To look at the differences, in JavaScript we have to declare the variable, which means we're going to use var. Remember, we only do that the first time we're using the variable, but we do declare it there. Where in Python we do not need to declare it. We also do not have a semicolon in Python. And Python has this one other one where you can cast other objects, so you can take maybe a dictionary or maybe a tuple and turn it into a list. Or maybe even a set. You can turn all those things into lists. Those are just other data types that you don't necessarily need to know now, but it is interesting to know. So, what you can do is you can access both of these arrays. Now, what you put in the square brackets is actually the index. So you're going to put that index in your square brackets in both of them. And of course, you can do anything with that. You could do math, you could print it out, you can treat it just like the variables that Jacob Linkus is talking about in his tutorial. There's lots of things you can do with it. We also sometimes need to know the length. Now, one thing to note is that the length is one more than the last index, the biggest index. The reason for that is, if you think about it, if I've got an array of 10 items, but it starts at 0, that means my last number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, is going to be 9. So our length is one more than our final index, but it is a count of objects in there. Now, in JavaScript, we see it appear as length property, so we do dot length. In Python, there's a function length that counts the length of it. Very slight difference, and of course, it just depends on what language you're in. Now here's where we get into the adding and taking away objects. Now, in both of them, you can do, in JavaScript you do push, and in Python you do append.
to add an item. Now this items can be whatever type, so it could be a boolean, it could be a string, it could be a float, integer, double, whatever you want it to be in both cases. But this adds it right on the end. So if you've got, let's take our length of 10, so our last index is 9, well then we're going to have an index of 10 and a length of 11. And it's that last object, that index 10 object is going to be this item. So that's what that does. Now this remove from the end just lops that last one off. It's like you took a saw and you just cut that last, you cut that last one off. You cut off that cubby, and that object's gone. And sometimes we'll use that. Now, JavaScript has two additional ones, shift and unshift. Shift adds to the beginning, so you glue a little cubby on the front, and then you move all of your indexes down. So you got one on the front, and so your 1 becomes your 2 becomes your 3, so on and so forth. And unshift takes that first one and gets rid of it. In both, we can remove the a certain value. Now this isn't the index, so you can't say remove 10. You're not going to say remove 10. What you're going to say is remove the value of 10. And you can do that in both. Now remember, in a list, you can have the same value 10 times if you want. If you do this remove, it's going to remove all occurrences of that value. We also, in both languages, have a get range type thing where it returns us a list of a certain range. So in JavaScript, we're going to do a slice. Now, of course, you could put 0 in here to get everything up to 3, or you could put length -1 here to get everything to the end. Very similar here, except for you have the benefit here of if you take this away, that's just like doing length the end. One thing I would like to show in both of these real quick that I'm going to add on to the bottom is how we go through it. Now, Jacob might kind of go over this too in his for and while, but we're going to go over it here too. So in JavaScript, we do a for, and we're just going to do a normal for. So that means we have to let I, so remember I is our incrementer, so we're going to increment with I, and we're going to set that equal to 0. So that's the first value of our array. And then we're going to say I is less than, let's do list2 dot length, and we're going to do I++. So a reminder how this works, and then to access it, of course, we're going to do list2 I. So reminder of how this works is we're creating a variable I, which is going to be a integer essentially, so it can only be the numbers we count, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can also be negative, but it's not going to be in this case. So we're going to let I equal 0, so that's going to be our first item. If it's less than the length, so if our length is, so if we have no items in there, it's going to be 0, then it's not less than that, it's not going to do anything. But if it's any other value, it's going to go do this thing, and then it's going to add 1 to it, and then it's going to hop right back here and check if it's less, and if it is, it's going to do this. This might look kind of tedious when you see the Python version of this, but there's more you can do with this, and sometimes in Python you have to do a little trick that I'll even show you. So in Python, what you would do is you would say for, now I'm going to use I again, but I is something different here. It's going to be I in, and we're just going to say list2. So very similar to I is an incrementer here, so it's a number. I here is actually the item out of the array. So you don't know exactly which one you're on. You don't know which index you're on, but if you just need to access the elements, you can do that. Now, and of course I could do something like I. Now, of course, in Python, if you did want to increment this way so that you do know your, say you do need to know your increment value, you could do for I in range of 0 to length of list2. And of course this would be very similar to this over here. This works very much the same way, and this does give you your index value. By no means is all of this all that you can do with arrays and lists and all that. There's actually a huge amount that you can do, and I encourage you to, if you're interested, read more about the particular language you're looking at. Every language does have a implementation of lists or arrays, so it's a very important concept. And feel free to watch this video over again if you need to review again, or maybe even look at other resources, read about them. But once again, thank you for joining us, and until next time, have a good day.